Scroll. Nope, not those notes. Okay. So the last 2 weeks for me have been really weird. I have been watching all the Final Destination movies because the new Final Destination came out, and like everybody, I saw most of the first Final Destination between, clips on the internet and TV growing up.
Sure.
But I'd never actually seen all of them. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, I've seen the logging truck incident from Final Destination 2.
Of course, yes.
Boy. Oh, right. Well, I have to explain why that's weird. That's not weird. I mean, people watch those movies. I've also been watching a lot of Studio Ghibli movies.
So that's a weird combination.
And that's been weird.
Yeah.
Because I was
just you're putting yourself on an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, but it's like I'm going to watch Final Destination 2, and then I'm going to watch Porco Roco, and then I'm going to watch whatever My Neighbor Totoro, and then Final Destination 3.
Yeah, that's a weird situation you got there.
Yeah, I don't know how I ended up here. It's just been a little strange.
Yeah,
quite the juxtaposition.
Yeah, when you watch those Final Destination movies, like, do you find that invading your thoughts, like as you're driving around town for your job and all that?
I would say only once, and it was when I was standing at the post office, and I noticed there was a roll-up door above me, and I was like, maybe I won't lean over the counter where that roll-up door could fall down and crush me, especially because there's a sign there to the left that says, door doesn't stop at the ceiling, you have to stop it manually. I was like, sounds broken.
It does sound a little broken.
Maybe I won't stand under it while I wait for my package.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
You hit that way too early. There was a camera tie-in. The whole reason I brought this up is because on Final Destination 3, in which they go to the roller coaster park and there's a horrible disaster that someone has a premonition about, and then death comes for them one by one in the order that they were killed off the roller coaster.
Spoiler alert.
Every single one of them is exactly the same. Like, some horror franchises, they kind of like, oh, what if we branched out and like we did something a little weird in the next one? And you watch them and you're like, why aren't they doing the original? They're leaving the formula. This is dumb. Final Destination doesn't do that. They're all the same movie every time, and it feels like you're just watching a worse version of the first movie 4 times. I don't know how I feel about it. Anyways, in the third one, one of the things is Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who we all know, from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and other movies. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. Anyways, Mary Elizabeth Winstead has a digital camera that she's taking pictures of for the newspaper because she's part of the school newspaper for this graduated class. And when she goes back and she sees that in each picture, she can decipher how people are going to die from the picture.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so she's trying to stop people from dying. It fails horribly, but she's using they're gonna die this way. Turns out it was something else. Anyways, that camera was a DMC DX8 Lumix.
A different sort of vibe cam when you're taking pictures and seeing people's demise.
It's a little different, but I was like, that is a DX8.
Interesting.
Cool.
You just can't help it, can you? You see a camera, you gotta identify it, gotta know what it is. You used to be that way with smartphones, and now you're that way with cameras.
It checks out. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's that was really the main thing. Is one of the key plot points in Final Destination 3 is a Lumix DMC DX8.
Interesting. Can you still buy that camera?
Probably.
Yeah.
I wonder how much it is on eBay now. It's probably exactly how much it was whenever it was new.
I don't know, man. Maybe that movie made it skyrocket in popularity.
All right. Holy cow. There's no way that's true. That's an interchangeable lens camera. That's a GX8. I want a DMC DX8. It's like, why is it $500 to $800? I am not immediately finding this on eBay. They may not even exist anymore, Daniel.
Wow. They all got snatched up.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe somebody destroyed all of them because of the movie. They don't want people seeing death.
Here's a DMC FX8. Maybe I wrote it down wrong. That one's only $50.
Oh. That sounds more realistic.
Anywho,
Interesting.
that was it. That was everything for the pre-show. You can go ahead and play the intro now.
Uh-huh.
Play it again, Daniel.
I'm not going to. We've already passed that point.
Golly, jeez. All right, well, I guess we can talk about... I don't want to.
You don't want to talk about Sony?
Don't make me
Everybody wants you
Don't
to talk
make
about
me
Sony.
do it. Ugh.
I think this camera is interesting. I think it's not interesting in a way where I want to buy it, but it's just like, what are they doing? What do they got going on here?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Beats me. Okay, so let's talk about the Sony FX2.
Yep. I mean, how can we not? Right? Everybody is into those Sony low price cinema line cameras.
So
they just came out with a new one.
FX3, FX6, FX9, they get cooler as they go up.
Yes.
So
and
they get
and don't forget, there's the FX30.
Right. So worse as they go down. Single digits are still probably full frame, which if you ask Sony, why the heck did they release this? They said we wanted a cheaper full frame option in the FX line. So this is an FX2, cheaper, still full frame. It slots in exactly between the FX3 and the FX30.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, like, I don't know if this was really rumored in the sense that, I mean, there was rumors that a camera like this was coming, but I feel like those rumors were more that it was going to be an update to the FX3. And then this comes in, and it's clearly in a different, I mean, it's priced differently. So it's clearly in a different slot. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, is there a new FX3 coming, or why are they targeting this lower point?
Sometimes I feel like whenever we're looking at Sony's lineup, it's a lot like trying to read the stones that we've threw into the air and they've fallen down, and we're trying to decipher like what is next for Sony. And this one has just really confused me.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
So what's confusing is that this is an A7 IV.
Yeah,
like they took the FX3 body, they refined it, and we should talk about the differences between the FX3 and this, as far as just purely the body, because I do think it's a general improvement over the FX3 body. But internally, it is. I mean, I guess it's more fair to say it's not an A7 IV. It's an A7C2.
Yeah,
because
so.
It has the AI chip with the autofocus stuff, whereas the A7 IV did not. So it's an A7C2 internals in an FX body.
Yeah, and what I put down is that it's kind of like how the FX3 was basically an A7S3. Like this is basically, I had put A7 IV, but you're right, it is more similar to the A7C2. And so it's kind of like they've used the same pattern before, where they take one of their hybrid cameras and turn it into an FX camera.
It just feels a bit late to do that because of how old the A7 IV is.
Yeah.
And
sure does.
It seems like, to me, we are on the precipice of an A7 V.
You would think.
And if you're going to release a cinema camera in the $2,700 range, which is probably going to be more expensive, maybe, than an A7 V. Now, it like so many questions. My first question is, now I have to pick a priority because now I'm ordering them. Anyways, first question, price.
Yep.
The Lumix S1 II is $3,100. The $3,200. The A7 III was $2,000. The A7 IV was $2,500.
Yep.
They moved it up market, which sure made sense, and then everyone moved up market. R6 II, Z6 III, both $2,500. Does Sony see their, because they're like, we make the sensors, we're the head of the pack for technology, we can charge more because this is basically the prototype of what every camera is going to be in 5 years, therefore it can be more expensive. Does this mean the A7 V is $3,000?
Oh, good question. I sure hope not, but you kind of have to wonder. And I feel like we're kind of with cameras getting to a point where I feel like smartphones have gotten to where, I mean, they're definitely still improving year over year, but I feel like things have slowed down a little bit in the sense that, if you have a camera that's a few years old, it's probably still pretty competitive, still performing pretty well. I mean, our XH2Ss are what, 3 years old?
3 years old, yeah.
And it still feels like a, very competitive, good camera.
That's because when we talk about Fuji, we're talking about a technology leader, Daniel.
And so it just seems
One
like
step ahead.
maybe we're kind of getting to a phase in like this technology where when new stuff comes out, it's not always the same price because the technology is not advancing as much. Like they're having to like push farther and farther to make these new versions actually better. And as a result, the price ends up being higher. I don't know.
I do wonder if it's also a matter of things have not gotten cheaper as fast as maybe they were, and that's why we're seeing delays and things trickling down. I thought, okay, Fuji's we now have an APS-C stack sensor. The A1 came out before that, so we're like, what, 4 or 5 years past when the first stack sensor came out? I thought that this generation of cameras when we were going to start seeing stack sensors and things.
Yeah. And not really.
Now we're seeing partially stacked as like there needs to be some sort of cost gap where we can get that down into that $2,000 to $3,000 price range and still offer the benefits of the speed. But global sensor stack sensors are still working their way into the consumer level at a pace that I'm surprised at.
Yeah.
Because backside illuminated came in and then everything was BSI. And it's taking a really long time to see like the speed advantages kind of come down where we're seeing those improvements. And I mean, technologies like pixel binning where you take like a quad bear sensor or you take something like the Pixis 12K sensor that can do like the 6 array into, you know, a full 8K, 4K, but still full frame. We can do those like interesting binning solutions and demosaicing algorithms. We don't see that in a lot of cameras either.
Yeah.
It's like most of the drone stuff, and now Blackmagic is doing it, but that's a cool technology that we're not really seeing. And so it's like there are neat advances still in camera technology and in sensor technology, but it feels like it's getting hard to get those to be economical in a way that makes sense. And so we're kind of like stuck with these older sensors. I mean, Lumix just released a camera that has an A7 III sensor in it.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is why my point number 2 here is Sony likes to TikTok. Not like that. Well, maybe like that.
Maybe a little bit like that.
Well, I mean, not as much as Fuji, clearly, but maybe a little like that. Anyway, the A7 IV, A7, was it? Yeah, the A7 III, A7R3, A7R4, I think had the same sensor in them, and if I remember that correctly. And so it's like they'll release the sensor, then they'll like release an improvement. I don't think they did that with the A7 II to the A7 III. I think the A7 III had a new sensor. But with this being released now, I'm really worried that the A7 V has the same sensor as the A7 IV.
I sure hope not. But
I still maintain that like if they're able to mass produce that sensor like they did, if they just take the same approach as the A7 III and the A7 IV sensor is like the sensor that ends up in everything, then maybe it makes sense that they stick with it. I think that the trade-off in rolling shutter is too much. I think that sensor is just a little too slow, and it's this 33 megapixel backside illuminated non-stack sensor from 4 or 5 years ago. It's just too slow.
Well, it's kind of for video. I mean, I think for photo, 33 megapixels is great, but for video,
for photo with a mechanical shutter. But one of the big selling features, even in photo, is speed. Like if you can get more speed, you can get better focus tracking.
True.
You can do sports photography, and then you can do some like HDR photography where you're going to take like 2 pictures and combine and that sort of stuff. All that comes out of like the read speed of the sensor, and you need the sensors to be fast to start moving things forward and like taking advantage of the advances in smartphone photography.
Yeah.
And I feel like with Nikon coming out with the Z6 III and Lumix with the S1 II, the Sony sensor was not good enough for them. They chose to release the S1 IIe with an A7 III sensor instead of an A7 IV sensor. And I don't know if that's because Sony didn't want to sell them the 33 megapixels because they're still holding it back for this FX2 and the future A7 V, or has every other camera company seen the performance of that sensor and said, boy, it takes really good photos. Boy, it has really good dynamic range and sharpness, but it's too slow.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting you say that because when I looked at this FX2, to me, the obvious competition to it is actually the Lumix S1 IIe.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
Same price, similar price, and, but an older sensor. And yeah, I mean, especially for video, I think you have to ask, like, are those trade-offs worth it on the sensor.
The A7 IIe can shoot internal RAW.
Wait, what? Sorry, which camera?
Thank you. Dear Lord.
I'm confused.
Woo! The Lumix S1 IIe. If you look at the video specs, it competes perfectly, if not better than this FX2 camera, because it can shoot open gate, and it has options where you can shoot extra wide 6K and like a 2x1 in order to get a faster frame rate if you need it. It can shoot raw internal. The shutter, whatever the rolling shutter on that camera is actually equal to or better than this camera, the FX2. Mm-hmm. It is, even though it's using a sensor that is even older, like another, like where it's an 8-year-old sensor instead of a 5-year-old sensor, the 1.2e is equals or outperforms FX3 in so many ways. It has more
FX2.
features. Thank you, FX2. Jeez. What a mess.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only way the FX2 is better, like besides the body stuff we'll talk about, is the megapixel count. So yeah, maybe for photos it's a little better, but I guess what I'm getting at here is that it surprises me a little bit that Sony announced this. And typically when Sony releases new cameras, they are kind of the technology leader, and we're generally kind of like, wow, okay, now I know what future cameras are going to look like from other brands. And with this one, it just doesn't really feel like it's that much better than anything else, and that kind of surprised me.
One of the takes that I've seen on this is it makes absolute sense in a vacuum, where you have the FX30 at $1,700 and it's an APS-C sensor and it's an FX body and it has all the features. You go up $1,000, you have this camera, rolling shutter aside, the video is still like a really good image quality. The image quality off the video is very good. Mm-hmm. It's sharp, color accurate. You go up another $1,000, you get that super old 12 megapixel sensor in the A7 III that's amazing in low light, has the dual ISO operation, and then you go up another $1,000 or so, and then you're at the FX6. And so it fills in a gap in their lineup that makes total sense, and that now you can be in the FX Sony world. You can convince yourself that you are able to color match to a Venice easier because you have S-Log3, and you're able to graduate straight from a $1,700 camera all the way up to a Venice in reasonable increments. Yeah, and so I think it does, like, if you're Sony, it's like, man, we kind of need to fill in this gap in the line because people want to shoot full frame, but the entry point is $3,500. But it falls apart if you think about literally any other camera at that price point.
Yeah. Like how does this compare against a Nikon Z6 Mark III? How does it compare against the Lumix S1 IIe? You're quickly, like, it doesn't look as impressive when you look at those.
Honestly, like an S5 II competes with this pretty well.
Yeah.
As far as just features and performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it kind of makes it seem like the main advantage you're getting here is that Sony ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the Sony ecosystem tie-in. And if you're not thinking about hybrid mirrorless world and you're only thinking about cine cameras, you're like, what is a reasonable cine camera that I could buy? Maybe I need to take photos for a shoot, but I need to be able to shoot them in S-Log3 because we're doing, location scouting, and I can apply like certain looks and LUTs, and we can figure that out better. And I just need something that's in the ecosystem. This can make a ton of sense. I just have trouble seeing anyone who's not like in that world, in that like pro cine world, buying this over something else.
Yeah. And I guess, like, thinking about that pro cine world, I just have a hard time seeing, like, are people going to pick this over the FX3 or the FX30? It's kind of the problem that the S1 IIe had, where that camera felt like it was kind of awkwardly between the S5 II and the S1 II. Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like this is in the same spot, where I feel like if I'm getting it because I'm conscious of budget, why am I not getting an FX30 instead? Mm-hmm. And if budget doesn't matter to me, why am I not getting an FX3 instead?
Yeah, exactly. I would have rather had an update to the FX3. I know that 12 megapixel sensor is still really good, but it's starting to get to a point where not having 6K available is kind of a problem, and not having a good open gate is kind of a problem. Yeah. And I think that for $3,700, you should be able to buy something that's stacked and in that, 20 to 30 something megapixel range that's going to give you like a 6K open gate with similar low light capabilities.
Well, like again, I think we have to bring it back to Lumix since we've been talking about them for the past few weeks.
Yep.
You know, the S1 II just came out. It sure is feeling like that's a better buy than the FX3.
It really does.
It doesn't feel like Sony has a good competition right now in the $3,000 to $4,000 video camera like bracket. I mean, the FX3 is still a good camera, but it feels like why, you know, based on specs and et cetera, if you're not already deep in the Sony ecosystem, why would you pick that over the S1 II?
There's a YouTube video that's like in my to watch list by Armando that's S1 II versus FX3 extreme low light test.
Yeah, low light might be the one place the FX. I mean, because of the megapixels, the FX3 probably wins there.
I haven't looked into it, but the headlines that I've been seeing is the Lumix S1 II basically competes, if not exceeds, in noise performance at low light compared to an FX3.
Wow, and you know, there's so many other things that the S1 II does better than the FX3. Open gate, 6K,
the
etc.
DR boost is really good.
Yeah, and so it feels like it's weird that Sony spent their energy in the part of the segment they chose. Like,
yep,
you know, you have the A7 IV as an option. Why, like, I know the FX series gives you some benefits with the cooling fan, the different body style, etc. But it just feels like, yeah, you're probably stealing some number of A7 series purchases from this. Like, so it's not like you're getting all new people. You know,
right.
You're getting some people that pick this over the A7 IV, and it just seems like maybe sometimes it's okay for people to shoot video on a Sony camera that's not an FX series camera. Like, it just doesn't seem like it adds enough to have this.
It just we're so almost deep into like segment 2 of this podcast. We haven't even talked about any of the specs or anything, but like, I think this is the most interesting thing to me is that this makes me really worried about the A7 V because I wanted that camera to blow everything else out of the water.
Yeah.
I wanted Sony to come in and just pull a Sony and be like, this thing has the coolest screen and has the best autofocus and it's a stacked or partially stacked sensor and it straight up competes and totally wipes the floor with the Z6 III and the S1 II.
Well, and
if they release something with the same sensor that's in this camera, it's not going to do it.
Yeah. And even though you and I don't shoot Sony, I think we're always interested to see what they release. And I think out of their cameras, the A7 always feels like maybe the most interesting one because it's kind of like the everyman camera. And it kind of shows us like where the industry is going, but it also, I think Sony spurs the rest of the industry on into doing these things. And so, yeah, I think we're all pretty invested in seeing them keep pushing forward with this stuff.
It feels like Sony has been like, Sony does and doesn't undercut themselves. They'll release a lower end camera with more features on you and then never update the older one. And so like they do in a way kind of undercut their cameras like that. But it just seems like you release this year, and if they release an A7 V later this year or early next, how are they not undercutting this camera immediately with that one?
It seems that way.
Especially if they release it with like, you can shoot pictures in S-Log3. And I don't know. It's like, is Sony on their heels? Or are they actually going to be pushing forward with the next camera?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to wait and see what they release. And I know we have, you know, kind of more discussion there. Do you want to go into that now, or do you want to talk about the features of this one?
I want to talk about the features of this one, but just kind of, I guess that's a primer for like, what do you want to see out of the A7 V is eventually where we're going to get to, because I think this is the table setter for that camera in a way that, like, if this had never released, I would have been I was very bullish on what the A7 V could be, because it's Sony. Yeah. With this now in the lineup, it just kind of, it sets a price and it sets a spec that says either the A7 through A7 V has to beat this and be more expensive, or it can't beat this in order to come in under it in price. And that is a very weird place to be.
I agree.
So, I mean, let's talk about this a little bit more, I guess. We have, like, everyone already knows what it is. I mean, it's basically an A7 IV with all the AI autofocus.
Yeah, so I don't think the A7 IV had the AI chip, right?
No.
And that's why you were saying it's really more similar to an A7C II.
Right, and it seems like this one comes with all the features from like the A1 too. It's got the auto subject detection switching, which is they're kind of the only ones doing that right now, where it'll switch between detecting birds and detecting people automatically, and that's great.
Yep.
And like, if you set it specifically in a mode, it's going to be better at, like, if you put it in human detection, it's going to detect humans better than if you put it in auto. But auto lets you not have to change it. And like, it's a really good system, and this is probably the best you're going to get.
One thing I saw was that some people were saying that it's about, for human and eye detection, is about 30% better than the FX3 and FX30.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. Let's see. Same 33 megapixel backside illuminated sensor, same rolling shutter for about 26 milliseconds. The base ISO is 4000. And the image on this is pretty good. It is slightly different than the A7 IV. It's leaning a little more into the magenta, which in like slightly different color balance. It still looks pretty good, but it's not neutral by any means. You'll have to color correct it if you want a neutral image, but it's still like, it kind of is giving you an idea of which direction Sony's going in, the way that they want their cameras to look, which is kind of starting to follow a little bit into the Canon territory of like, maybe we'll lean a little more on the magenta for the skin tones.
Interesting.
So
okay.
It can do RAW over HDMI only, no RAW internal.
Feels like a conspicuous miss modern day.
It's like, if you're not going to give me RAW, at least give me OXCN. Like, they have this really decent
XOCN, I think.
Yeah, XOCN, like intermediate codec. And it's weird that they're not even offering that internal.
Yeah. It feels like it's a cinema camera, guys. Come on.
Yeah. It can do 4K 60 only cropped. It can do 4K 30 oversampled, which is a good image. Same image that we're seeing off the A7 IV. Again, it has an improved fan. And so when Sony's at on stage, this thing can record forever. And so the cooling is really good. If you're like really happy with your A7 IV, but you're worried about it's overheating, something like this would give you the probably a slightly improved image quality or better, similar image quality, but you can just do it forever.
We've talked about that, the fan, feature, and I mean that, definitely something I expect from a, cinema type camera.
Yeah, definitely. You can do DCI 4K, which is something you can't do outside of the FX line. No open gate, no log in 4K over HDMI.
It's like, why? It doesn't make any sense.
I think maybe that's a bug. It's just really weird. It has Cine EI mode. I don't actually know what that is. And then it can do anamorphic D-squeeze in camera, but only in 2:1 and 1.3:1.
Yeah.
No support for 1.5:1.
And it doesn't shoot open gate either.
Yeah.
So
the DR is a little DR is different than the A7 IV, but similar. They're essentially doing less noise reduction in camera because it's
appreciate that.
a Cine camera. Yeah, definitely. Especially for something like this. And so you're going to get, roughly 14 and a half stops total. And then this goes to 12.1 instead of 12.8 if you're looking at like a, that medium noise criteria.
Probably because of the less noise reduction.
Yeah, exactly. But like, that's fine. You're going to be able to do some noise reduction and probably squeeze 13-ish stops out of this thing if you need to, which is decent. Like, it's decent for what this is. One of the big things, it can shoot photos, which you couldn't necessarily do in the other FX cameras.
Well, I think you could, but it was not good. It felt like they didn't have mechanical shutter and the megapixels are really low. It's like not a good photo camera.
So this one is a electronic first curtain shutter camera. So you're not getting the mechanical shutter for the first and second curtain, but you will enable the sensor, start taking the picture, and then drop the rear shutter in order to end the picture.
Yeah.
Which should be able to allow you to freeze motion. The only downside of the electronic first curtain is that, like, if you're doing photos with like really like creamy specular highlights, like big bokeh, it can sometimes in the corners of the frame cut the bokeh in half, so you get like half moons. Which can be a little weird in certain situations. That has to do with like LEDs and like the flickering of the lights, I guess, and that sort of thing. So you're getting like some of the disadvantages of electronic shutter, but it's not enough to, desire a full shutter mechanism. So
interesting. But it basically otherwise can do everything the A7 IV can do as far as photo.
Yeah, pretty much. With the addition of being able to shoot S-Log3 in photo.
Yeah, which you were saying maybe that's useful if you want to try color grading or visualizing a scene.
Frustratingly, you can't use the LUT library in stills mode.
That's a weird.
I didn't know that wasn't a thing. Apparently, like, yes, you can load your LUTs in on a Sony camera to have your like looks or whatever baked in or previewed for the footage that you're shooting, but you can't apply that in stills.
Yeah,
And like
doesn't
for
make any
this,
sense.
that would make total sense. Like do your grade in S-Log3, your location scouting, get your pictures out of camera with
Yeah.
your like. Why?
Absolutely.
That doesn't make any sense to me. But like it's another limitation.
Yeah.
No support for 32-bit float audio. 24-bit only or 16-bit only.
Yeah, I guess I didn't consider that. Even if so, they have an XLR handle add-on, but even with that, you can't.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. Total
Big miss because the S12E can do it if you have the XLR thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so like that's basically the feature set that's worth talking about. I think we should run through kind of everything that's different about this thing. I have a list here, but I also kind of wanted to maybe flip through the pictures and maybe talk through
Sounds
it. So
good.
the back screen is the 1 million dot, like just standard flip screen. It's not the tilty flip screen, it's just a standard.
Pretty garbage screen resolution.
And it's in poor resolution.
Like worse. I keep comparing to the S12E, and part of that's because we talked about it so recently. But worse than that screen, which that screen didn't feel great either.
Yeah, it's just
and that was the same screen that was on the S5 too.
Yeah, just a total mess screen. They added an EVF though, which we haven't seen in FX2, 3, or FX30 camera before. And this is a really cool EVF because it's like tilty and it has a custom button on it and it's 5.6 million dots. And like it is a pretty cool
I think it can tilt up to 90 degrees. And the, what am I thinking of? The iCup is reversible.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So you can like go either way, either get more of a shield on it or not.
I mean, that's a pretty cool feature.
Yeah.
I would be happy if my camera had that.
Oh yeah.
But it's cool, but not cool enough to make me say like, I've got to have like this. I've got to choose this camera over another one because of that feature.
I mean, I think they're expecting people to just shoot these things with monitors. And so they thought that they could save the money on the rear screen, but then invest in a pretty decent EVF.
Yeah, I'm okay about the rear screen. I don't love it, but I understand. But I guess I'm talking about the EVF and saying I think it's cool, but for me, it doesn't sell the camera.
Yeah, for sure. Has that Hot-Shoe thing. They added you can use it with the standard whatever top handle, like the Hot-Shoe passes through whatever for the FX line.
And you can actually buy it in a kit with that handle.
And it's got a deeper grip, a new fan design. Other than that, it's like full-size HDMI. They didn't do every single Sony camera has these dual card slots where it's like CF Express A and SD. This one only has one of those. And then it has just a standard UHS 2 slot in addition.
It was weird that you can't use two CF Express Type A. Feels kind of like a strange limitation.
I was surprised that that's where they cut cost.
Yeah,
I wasn't expecting that.
Although they have more data on how their people use their cameras than we do, and I wonder if they were just finding that not that many people wanted to load two CF Express cards.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because I mean, you and I, like with the Fujis, we have just a CF Express and an SD. And I don't know if I necessarily like if anything, I sometimes wish I could use two SD cards, but I don't know if I really feel like I'm missing anything there. So maybe it made sense.
I think that it's maybe a matter of it doesn't have enough features to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
To me, if you have a video camera, the only reason that I would want two CF Expresses is if I was doing proxies and raw recording, and I would want to split.
Do on this camera.
Yeah, I want to split media, and you can't do that on this camera.
Yeah.
Can't you do that on XH2S where you can record raw over HDMI and then record proxies to the SD internal?
I feel like it does.
CF
I feel
internal?
like it does have that. Yeah.
It'd be cool if you could do that here.
Also, still a little annoyed that Sony uses CF Express Type A whenever everybody else is using B. But that's neither here nor there.
And they're real committed to it. You just can't take your media with you. So as far as the back of the camera, they added a movie stills switch. They had to move a bunch of things over for the EVF. I'm comparing this to the FX3. Otherwise, I mean, you have kind of the same rotating dial on the back. You have two function mode buttons. They added a home button in addition to the menu, which I think that what I understand is the home button is useful in certain modes, but you can't set it to a custom, weirdly.
It's kind of annoying. I like cameras where even if the buttons are labeled for a certain use case, you can like remap everything.
Yeah,
give me the choice.
Definitely agree there. So let's see. I think that the connectivity on these is basically the same. Like the HDMI port is reversed, but it's in the same location, and like it's got USB-C and all that sort of stuff on there. So One thing that is weirdly different, the microphone and the headphone jack aren't under doors.
Yeah, I can't remember. Was the old one that way?
No, the old one had them under a door.
Kind of bothers me a little bit.
Really? I thought it was kind of a neat deal.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess most of the time it's fine. It depends on like weather sealing and stuff. But I guess I'm used to the doors.
Used to the doors, not the band. Okay, another little bit of a weird thing. I guess the other one was like this too. The joystick for autofocus is on the top.
Maybe it makes sense if you have it like in a rig or something.
I mean, I think about how I use my camera sometimes where it's like you can have it up to your eye where your wrist is tilted and your thumb is on the back and your finger's on the top. But often it's like holding it down, my thumb is on the top.
Yeah.
And in those situations, having that, joystick there, I guess kind of makes sense, especially if you have this tilty EVF where you can hold it down.
That's a good point. I think also the XLR handle, if you're holding it from a top handle, maybe it's easier to have that on top. Also, if you have it facing you, if you're recording yourself, maybe it's easier to access when it's on top.
Yeah, I could see that. So otherwise, basically the same. I think there's like one more pin on top that is or isn't threaded. And then like obviously it has like the tight wide zoom and the 3 custom buttons on the top and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very similar to the other FX cameras. They clearly have the body kind of designed to not need a cage. Where you can kind of just like screw stuff onto it.
I think generally it's just improvements across the board. For instance, they added 2 threads on the bottom and they are vertically in line from front to back.
Yeah.
So that you can put a plate on it that has the locking pin so that it doesn't rotate.
Yeah.
Which is really nice. So it's like they took the FX3 design and they just improved a lot of things, moving those ports out from under the door, adding the extra quarter 20s on the bottom, deepening the grip, adding a really good EVF, I think, and another custom button on the EVF. So like overall, this is an FX3 body with a lot of good user improvements.
Yeah, seems that way to me too.
I would expect that the next FX3 is probably going to be this body again, but maybe with a better rear screen.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think they've kind of. It seems like it's expensive for these brands to redesign that stuff every time, and it feels like we're starting to see more cases where they sort of reuse. Like here's a design that they're basically going to reuse for the next few. Yeah,
for sure. I guess one more point is all the features that Sony has released up to this point are basically in this camera. So like a lot of the the ZVE1 features that we saw that have like the AI refocusing stuff.
Because it's got that AI chip.
All that jazz that is missing from the A7 IV that we're like, boy, sure would have been nice to have those whenever the ZVE1 came out. Which ZVE1, cheaper than this.
Yep.
Maybe a better buy? I don't know. Anyways, doesn't have the fan, so it doesn't record forever, I guess.
Yeah.
So, this is like, it's a good camera. It's just a little weird from a sensor and price perspective.
Yeah, I have a hard time picturing buying this over an S12E unless I already have a lot of Sony stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So let's take a quick break and then let's just talk about Sony.
We'll be back in just a moment, but we wanted to let you know that if you'd like to support the show, you can now subscribe to us on Patreon. It helps cover our hosting costs so we can keep the show running, and you might find an occasional behind-the-scenes post on there, like some photos we've taken recently or a mini review of some new gear. If you're interested, you can find us at patreon.com/cameragearpodcast.
Did you ever fix that battery that's over there?
No. I need to figure out what's going on with that.
It's not just it won't charge past 80%?
Yeah. So it's a small rig, 50-watt V-mount battery. It's very new, like a month old maybe, and it won't charge past 80%.
Is there a way to like reset it or something?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, and I need to contact their support because a lot of times you don't fully charge batteries, for longevity. And it makes me wonder if it's in some type of like shipping mode or something.
I mean, 80% is kind of like, if it was a weird number, then it's like, nah, but 80% would be exactly where they would set that to.
So I'm wondering if there's like some combination, like I need to like press the power button 6 times or, something weird. So I'm going to
Have you tried just like licking the pins on the bottom?
Have not yet tried that. Maybe I should try that.
Maybe you should.
Yeah. I don't know. Weird.
Okay, Daniel. We've talked just like went straight into talking about how this FX2 is kind of sitting in the market. Sony's current lineup, they have the A7 IV still. I think it still costs whatever, $2,500 or something. Maybe it's $22 now. They have their compact versions, the A7C2. They have the A7R5 and the A7CR. It's like those are their kind of two $2,500 and high-end $4,000 cameras. Above that, they have their, really expensive flagship stuff like the A1 and the A9 III. Below it, they have their APS-C stuff like the A6700 is all the way down at $1,400. So there's not really like too much in the gap between $1,400 and $2,500 unless we're talking about the FX30 or, I don't know, maybe like the ZVE1. But effectively, they have the 33 megapixel sensor cameras, and now there's 3 of them. They have the 12 megapixel sensor cameras, which there's 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have the APS-C cameras, which there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then they have the stack stuff above it. But like those are the 3 sensors that they're currently putting in things. Then those are like, that's their camera. I think that, the technology that's like, yeah, the autofocus and the AI chip is really good. But when we're looking at the sub $4,000, I guess they have the 63 megapixel sensor, and that's in 2 cameras.
Yeah.
Well, and plus the Leica and a few other things. But it's like they have a few different technology stacks that they're putting in a bunch of different cameras, and it feels like it's all gotten really old. And even the A1 II and the A1, that stack sensor is 5-6 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they like their sensor making line, which like it's totally 2 different companies, right? It's like Sony, like semiconductor, whatever's, and then it's like Sony, the camera company.
I think I heard a rumor at one point they were actually thinking about splitting it off more completely into a different company. I don't know.
I mean, sure, but it's like they're not. It's not like Sony that makes the cameras is like also making the sensors. Sure. It's like here's a sensor company that makes and sells it to everybody, including themselves. Mm-hmm. Like here's the camera company. And it does seem like there's a little bit of a favoritism as far as like Sony gets.
Sure.
Well, like Sony should get the coolest stuff first and not give it to somebody else first. But I mean, like the whole like partially stacked sensor tech that Nikon and Lumix are using are Sony sensors.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing them in Sony cameras. And so it's like, is Sony saving something that they're going to like come out with and blow us all away with, like that whole global sensor in the A9 III, or are they just on their heels because they know that autofocus is what people really buy cameras for? And so if it says they're like trading on their reputation, like Sony is like the technology leader for so long, and all the YouTubers use Sony, and Sony's so good, and everyone wants to eventually own a Venice or a Burano, and so they're just like trading on the name and using like what's becoming outdated tech, and just like people are just going to buy it because they can, and we'll just keep releasing features? Or are they like waiting for the technology to get to a point where they're going to like blow us away again?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I definitely think they are trading on their reputation right now, and you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who would try and say that Sony doesn't have the best autofocus, which for the YouTube crowd I think is really big. Not so much for maybe other professional work, but I mean the sensor thing seems like a problem to me. I feel like when I think about like what does an A7 V need to have, I feel like what I expect it to have is some sort of medium megapixel, like a 33 megapixel sensor, but something that's fast, like a stacked sensor type thing. Because we've got 45 megapixel sensors, stacked and non-stacked. So like that's kind of been done at a higher price point. Mm-hmm. We have the APS-C 26 megapixel stack sensor that the X-H2S is using, and I still don't really feel like there's cameras that compete, with that. Like
we haven't seen any other camera using that sensor, and I've been surprised by that.
Well, like okay, why? Like
cost.
Probably because it's X-Trans.
I mean, can't they take that sensor and put a different color array on it?
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know.
You would think, but I just don't know how it's done.
It's just like build it different, right? Like
but it just seems like Sony needs to do something that's pushing that forward in a meaningful way, and it doesn't seem like. I know you can take an existing sensor and squeeze more and more out of it. Like Lumix has been doing that with that A7 III sensor, but it just seems like they've got to like make a step forward in this technology at that price point. Like it can't be a $6,000 camera. It's got to be something that people can actually buy. And it seems like they need to get something that's a little bit higher megapixel and a little bit faster.
Yeah, to be competitive, I think that they could release an A7 IV with the same stinking 33 megapixel sensor, add some new features, and people would love it and buy it, but be like, kind of a bummer, but it's still like cooler for all these reasons.
Yeah, I think that people would still buy it, but I don't like, it doesn't feel like it would be the kind of product that would make people switch to Sony.
No, and it doesn't seem like the kind of product that would be exciting.
Yeah.
And so, like, I want it to not be that. I want the A7 IV to not be this same 33 megapixel sensor. Like, it's a good sensor. It's really sharp. It's super color accurate. It produces amazing images. It's just slow. And I think for a hybrid mirrorless camera, especially in today's market at that $3,000 price point, it has to be faster. And I don't see Sony releasing something with the same 24 megapixel partially stacked sensor that Nikon and Lumix are using. I don't think Sony would have sold them that sensor to use in their cameras if Sony was planning on using it in their flagship mid-range camera.
Yes, especially not before that camera releases.
Exactly. So I think that it has to be better than what you're able to do with the S1 II and the Z6 III. And I don't know if that means it's fully stacked. Maybe like against all odds, they release a global shutter sensor that like fits whatever. That'd be ridiculous.
It would be. I mean, but even a stacked sensor seems like it'd be cheaper and it would be meaningful. You know, if they had a full frame, you know, somewhere between 24 and 35 megapixel sensor, you know, that was stacked. That feels like it would be something that has not happened yet.
It would be curious to see them do what Canon did whenever Canon released the R6 III, which obviously not stacked or whatever, but that sensor that they stuck in the R6 III, they then put in the R8. And it's like, oh wow, I can get the same sensor and speed technology out of my $1,500 full frame camera that I could get out of a $2,500 full frame camera. Yeah. I don't know if Sony would do that or if like the economics make sense to do that, but it would be kind of cool to see like, there's no way, but an A1 sensor or the A1 sensor in an A7 III. Yeah. There's no way.
Yeah, I think those two are too different for that to be likely.
It's far too different for sure, but I think it has to be partially stacked or it has to be fast enough. And I don't think you can get a BSI CMOS sensor above 26 megapixels that reads fast enough to be able to do things like shoot 6K open gate at 60 frames per second.
Do you feel like most of it for you comes down to the sensor thing, or do you think there's other things that Sony's kind of lacking that they need to push forward on?
I think it comes down to feature set and sensor technology. I want to see them put a sensor in there that is like, wow, this is really good, and that's what we're going to see in the next camera, all the cameras for the next 5 years. Yeah. I don't think the 33 megapixel is the next 5 year. I mean, I do think it is the next 5 year sensor, but
you wish I
don't want it to be. I want it to be something that's better than that. Yep. And maybe it's actually this partially stacked sensor that we're starting to see in the C6.
Yeah, I mean the dynamic range seems like the problem. Like the dynamic range in photo seems like that's the problem with that sensor, but you know, maybe Sony can do some magic to improve that.
I think that the sensor is what unlocks, like the speed of the sensor is what unlocks things for us. And like Fuji did this whole, you know, marketing or whatever, but they like 14-bit readout off of, I'll make sure it's coming down into a 10-bit codec eventually, but they're reading 14-bit off of the XH2S sensor up to 30p and instead of 12-bit. And I think that you do get a little bit of more color fidelity and that sort of thing off of that. And all these sensors shoot 14-bit RAW. It would be cool to see them be able to read off in a 14-bit mode at full frame size in order to give us more image fidelity and more flexibility and like better color and better dynamic range. Yeah. And if Sony had a fast enough sensor, it would be cool if they did that. I talked about like a little while ago that it would be cool to see them push into 16-bit RAW in full frame.
Sure.
And you can't really do that unless you have the speed and the processing power to handle it. And so I think that things like 14-bit readout, 16-bit photo, open gate recording, 60 frames per second in 4K, not cropped, all of those things are unlocked by a faster sensor.
Yeah, faster sensor and faster processor.
And a faster processor. And like those are the things that I want to see Sony do.
Yeah.
Is because it seems like, you know, they've improved a lot with like the codecs in these hybrid cameras where you can get some like all intra 400 megabit per second type codecs that are actually decent to work with instead of like the 4K 100 megabit 8-bit stuff that they were stuck with for a while.
Yeah, I'm glad they finally got that figured out.
Yeah, and so it's like you with a Lumix or a Fuji or whatever, you can still get, or you can get like more like chunky codecs to work with that have a little more flexibility and are less compressed. But things like their XOCN and like Sony has good like compression formats, so they can offer you like decent quality at smaller file sizes. But even still, I would like to see them like push forward in those feature sets that other cameras are competing with. I think that they're going to keep locking us out of a shutter angle to the FX line, which is stupid, but whatever. And I don't know. It's like, I don't want to see them go down the road that Canon did whenever they're still kind of the market leader, but where Canon's like, we're going to lock features out from certain lines, even though we could totally offer them. And like, we see them do it with like the C80 versus the C400, right? Where it's like, oh, we decided not to put like this type of card or whatever in there, so now it can't do everything that the other one can, even though they have the same sensor.
Right.
And whenever Sony does things like keep shutter angle out of their hybrid mirrorless cameras, it feels like a arbitrary limitation that they're making just to create market sector.
That one's really frustrating because it's just software.
For sure. But it's like, people use these things to make a lot of video content, especially the hybrid stuff where it's like they are doing 50-50. And yeah, there's a lot of people that are going to buy, when they buy an A7 IV because it's the highest megapixel camera at $2,500 sort of. You could buy an XT5, I guess, or an XH2. But like for full frame, that 33 megapixels is a nice bump. Like it's a decent, decent bump over 24. And so like there's reason to want those kind of things out of a photo camera. And they're always going to be a little bit stuck between like, how do we offer a really good photo camera, but then also decent video specs in a hybrid? And that's why they have the FX line. But I don't know. Like for me, an A7 V, I want it to be way faster. And I want them to like start pushing the technology into the things that like Lumix is doing and that we've seen other camera companies do for a while that they just still haven't offered.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really frustrating to me that the processor is a limitation in cameras because that feels like not something we should be limited on at this point with computer.
It's probably battery. It's probably battery limited more than processor limited.
It's probably true. Yeah. I don't know. It's it feels like Sony is better positioned than any other company to push those things forward. So I think that's why it's frustrating to us when they kind of feels like taking the easy road out of just like, we'll squeeze a little bit more out of this existing sensor.
And maybe it's just a matter of like the contraction of the camera market.
Could be.
Where it doesn't make sense to be putting all that time and investment and money into it because they're only going to sell so many.
That's true.
And they have the market share and the name share recognition now because of that huge marketing push into the YouTube community. And so it's like you go search best camera or whatever, and you have all these YouTubers that are super invested in Sony and they're like, they want to sell their lenses and their ecosystem. And so like, that's just the camera they recommend because they know it. And like, they're like, it's good, buy a Sony. And so it's like, they have the name share and the market share, and so they don't necessarily need to push as much as they were before. So like,
I don't like it, but I can't disagree with it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a lot riding on the A7 V.
Interesting.
Maybe maybe more so for me than what's actually. Yeah. Like they could probably just release a Met camera and be totally fine. But to me, like it's gotta be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the camera that people buy.
Mm-hmm. It kind of is. Yeah. I mean, and right now, if I was trying to convince me to buy a camera in that price range, I don't see how the A7 IV would be my top choice. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I kind of share your concern that the A7 V may also not be like clearly the best camera in that bracket, which it feels like for Sony it should be.
It's just, in a lot of ways, the A7 III was the default camera.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it felt like when that camera came out, it really did kind of push things forward.
It competed and was better than a lot of cameras in a lot of ways. It was worse than some cameras in a lot of ways too. But in general, it was like, if I want to go full frame and I have $2,000, so the E-mount ecosystem is good to be in. Sony seems to like going places. The autofocus is really good. Like a hybrid mirrorless camera, the A7 III that was it.
Yep.
And it was like, what do I buy? You could just recommend that one. The A7 IV is like, well, if you're blah, 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 And like, and it's nice that we have a ton of choices. Like, to me, if someone's like, I don't know, I just kind of like want to get into photography, and I kind of want, like, I don't know, maybe I'm 50-50 photo video, I would recommend to them, like, get a Z5 II, get a S5 II.
Yeah.
Like, though either of those cameras, like, you're gonna have tons of lens options, and they're both gonna be like, the Z5 II is gonna be better for photo, the Lumix S5 II is gonna be better for video, and they're both less than $2,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say the price is right for those, and I mean, I still feel like I'd be happy using either of those cameras today.
Yeah, but like that's kind of where we are right now. Is like, if someone's like, what would you recommend? Just offhand, you know very little about what I'm shooting, but you know that I'm a hobbyist, not a professional. What would you recommend for me? It's those two cameras.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, there's other things in that price range that are like good, but to me, it's kind of the best like bang for your buck right now. Whereas Sony used to just own that.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting that that's changed.
Yeah, and it's now there's like, if you can buy a $1,400 A7000 or Alpha 7000, everything under that is 10 years old, and the next step up is $2,500, $2,200 as an A7C2, and it's like they're not. It just feels like it's been so long since they've had like a really competitive camera in that bracket.
Yeah.
And we've just kind of been waiting to see what they're going to do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because you misspoke and said A7000, which does not exist.
It's
A6700.
6700
feels
thank you.
ancient at this point. Like,
I mean, but it's not. Like, the A6700 came out, what, a year and a half ago?
I guess so. Yeah.
And it's still like one of the best APS-C cameras you can buy, right next to the S1 too. No, you can do it, Lucas. XS2? Is that it? XS20. XS20. There it is. Yep.
Got it.
Nailed it. But even at $1,400, like, you can buy an S5 II on sale for less. Like,
pretty much.
The A6700 has better video specs in some ways, but the S5 II is like really good. That's tough, man.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you want to see from Sony in this, like, by the end of next year?
I mean, I think selfishly, I'm interested in seeing, some of the higher end cinema stuff. There's been rumors that, so first off, there's rumors that they've registered like 3 cameras that haven't been announced yet. So maybe there's stuff coming. And I know there have been rumors that they're going to update the FX6 and the FX9, with the FX9 being maybe more likely to happen sooner. And I think, like, just for where I'm at with the stuff I shoot, I'm interested to see what like a new FX6 would be, because the Pixis 12K just came out. It's that $5,500-ish price. It feels like FX6 would probably be within $1,000 of that, and I'd be interested to see like what does Sony have at that level. And that's also a camera that I think a lot of people kind of use as their entry into more professional stuff. So I think that's an interesting one, but I'm a little biased because that would be more personally interesting to me. But I think the FX6 and FX9 are probably due for an update.
I'm really intrigued by a new FX6. I think that's a really good stepping stone camera and a decent cinema camera for like where it sits in the market. And things like the Pixis 12K and the C80 coming out are, both of those cameras I think are better than an FX6.
Yeah, it again feels like Sony. I mean, it's just the cycle though. Like that when the FX6 came out, it was kind of the best one, and then these other companies have surpassed it. It feels like it's Sony's turn to, like return the volley.
I mean, even if Sony came out with an FX6 that only competed and didn't exceed those two cameras, there would be reason to buy it, because it starts getting you into a situation where you can work in Sony workflows.
Yeah.
And if you get an FX6 and you know how to use it, then you could DP on a job that's using FX9s or Buranos or maybe even a Venice, and it wouldn't be too great of a leap.
Yeah.
And so, like, having that camera there that people can be familiar with and learn Sony on, I think is critical. And so, I don't know, to me, it's like the FX6 is really important for a stepping stone to get people started in Sony that will then have a cinema career in Sony.
Yeah, I think that's true. Or even if it's just that their own work, if they're, running their own business or something, there's a very easy stepping stone up to more expensive stuff.
Yeah, there's plenty of like, game shows and TV shows and documentaries and stuff that are all shot on FX6 and FX9.
Yeah.
And like, it's a good camera for those kind of things, or even like broadcast stuff.
Yep.
So
yeah. So we'll see what they do there.
I think that when I said everything under the A6700 is like 10 years old. I think that's not fair to the ZV-E10 and the ZV lines, which are all less than $1,000 and all like decent cameras. And so just stop writing that email. I don't know. For me, for Sony, by the end of next year, the A7 IV has to come out.
Sure.
And it has to blow us away.
I'll be surprised if the A7 V doesn't come out this year.
Same. I want to see a new A7R6. And I want to see them push the megapixels. I think it's just going to be another 63 megapixel sensor camera, and that sensor is fine. I think it's really good, but I want to see them do like 90.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I want to see them
GFX.
Yeah, I want to see them start like pushing on Fuji's GFX line with something that is smaller, more portable, better autofocus, faster, cheaper, like full front, like. I think in a lot of ways, a really high megapixel full frame camera could like put a huge dent in what medium format is trying to be as like this like premium thing. But if like Sony came out and said 63 megapixels at 16-bit or 81 or 90 megapixels 14-bit, I think that would be crazy.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that out of something like an A7R6.
That feels like a very Sony thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And so those are the two things that I really want to see out of Sony is them to go even farther. Because like Canon came out with the A7R5 II, and that was only 45 megapixels. Like no one's doing 63 right now except for Sony in full frame. It is the highest megapixel full frame camera that you can get. And I think there's room for those professionals that need as many megapixels as you're willing to give them. And I would love to see Sony push it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something, and plus it might spur Fuji to do more with the GFX line.
Yeah, for sure. That would be really cool. Because like they're trying to make GFX faster and smaller. Mm-hmm. And like Sony needs to be pushing up to like bigger and better.
Yeah.
So those are the two things that I mostly care about. Otherwise, like I just kind of want to see them, keep improving their color science. I want to see open gate in future cameras. I want to see them bring XOCN down into some of the consumer stuff. And I mean, otherwise, like they've been killing it with lenses recently. Just absolutely killing it. That 50 to 150 f2.
Yeah. That seems like a really good lens.
Just wow. And then like they came out with the 28 to 70 f2 and like they're doing a really good job. Sony's making some really cool lenses. I've been trying to think if there's like a lens that I just really, really want to see somebody make. And I mean, I think these fast zooms are really cool. I don't think they have like a 1.4, like 135 millimeter or 1.4, like under 24 millimeter, like on those like far ends doing something that's like super fast and super heavy. Like I would like to see Sony make something that competes with like a Plena, like a 135, 1.8.
Well, it feels like eventually they'll get there just because they've hit so many of the standard things. You know, once you do that, you've got to kind of look on the fringes and figure out like what are we not covering. Or
even just like keep improving, giving us like lighter, better lenses. Does Sony have like a cine lens line?
I don't know if they do or not.
I don't know.
I don't think so, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly I want to see different out of what Sony's doing. I've just been mostly impressed with all the G Master stuff and all the lenses they've been coming out with recently. And so just like maybe they keep doing what they're doing on lenses. Yeah. And otherwise, it's like just give us cameras that people want.
Mm-hmm. Just give us cameras people want.
Yeah. By people, I mean me, because I'm probably the only one that matters.
Obviously.
Yeah. Clearly. I speak for everyone when I say give us cameras that people want.
And you don't think the FX2 is one of those?
Honestly, no. I don't know who's asking for the FX2.
Well, and I guess that is the one last thing I wanted to get your opinion on. Like, who do you think should buy that camera? Is it the people that are already in cinema world? But I keep coming back to like why get that over an FX30 or an FX3.
To me, you buy an FX2 if you are in a workflow that's using FX6, 9, or Venice or Burano, and you need like a full frame, the cheapest full frame camera that you can buy for location scouting, taking pictures, or like something that fits into your workflow, like which could be like all kinds of different things.
Maybe you need
it's
some
even like
gunshots or something.
Maybe it's even like a director monitor camera where it's like, I mean, like whenever we shot that TV shoot, it was like, okay, we're like working on framing this up. I mean, if you just had, instead of like lugging out your whole cine rig, if you just had a handheld camera where you could put the same stinking lens on it that you're going to put on the big camera and like work frame out blocking and like do all that stuff before you like rig up everything, you're like, you're setting lighting. And I think there's things in that range of like, it fits into a workflow where you just kind of need the cheapest thing and you need it to be able to take photos. Maybe that's where it falls into buy. Otherwise, like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean,
like if you're just a regular person not doing this big production thing, it just doesn't really seem like it gives you enough to be worth it.
I think that it's like, why not just buy a used like A7 IV for way cheaper if you need that sensor,
or a ZVE1 or an A7C2 if the AI stuff is like
for sure. But it's like, maybe it's like you need to be in Sony. You have to replace an A7 IV, you need something in that workflow, and the EVF is really appealing. All the rigging stuff is really appealing. It's like, I think there's room for this in people's like workflow.
Yeah.
I don't know if like upgrading from like an FX30 to an FX2 totally makes sense, but like maybe there's a world where you have everything already set up and you just want to swap out the camera for something that's maybe a little better image quality and you don't really feel like the rolling shutter is a problem, because like for most people it kind of isn't. And if there's not a lot of movement, you're not doing anything that's like handheld off a gimbal, like people can get by with the A7 IV forever. So like maybe as an upgrade from the FX30 it kind of makes sense, because it just fits into that form factor. So like I think there's room for it. There's a spot for like where people are in Sony world, they needed the in-between thing. Now they have the in-between thing. But for someone coming into it fresh that doesn't need all the rigging capability and they're just looking for like, what's a cool, like full frame hybrid mirrorless camera that's good in video, not this.
Yeah. Not this.
That's not fair.
Coming out a little stronger.
Yeah, sorry. I feel bad that it's like they did all this work and released what is legitimately a really cool camera. If this camera came out 2 years ago, totally different reception.
Yeah.
Fanfare out the wazoo. But it is coming out in the shadow of the S1 II, and that makes it a little tough sell.
Yeah.
And now it's like the A7 V is looming, which is either going to make this camera irrelevant or it means the A7 V is going to suck.
I think you're right. I mean, it's always I think what it is for me is it's always surprising when a new camera comes out and I'm not impressed in some way of like, wow, I can't believe they brought these features to this price point, or wow, I can't believe this is even possible. And it felt like this one did neither, where it's like, yeah, I can look at it and say, I can see why somebody would buy this, but it's just hard to get excited about it.
It's the EVF, man. You just got to focus on that.
Yeah.
Wow, no one's ever made an EVF tilt before.
I don't think that's true. I don't know. It's what it is.
Yeah.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com. And you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.